What is up, everyone? So, we're doing a different kind of non Wednesday show for our good buddy Gus Stone here because Gus got an awesome guest and he's got some questions, don't you, Gus? You got
I
some
do.
questions,
I
Gus?
do.
But before we do that,
Here comes cryptoholics. We got Bigfoot in the woods. We got aliens in the sky. We got ghosts in the attics. Here comes cryptoholics.
Fighting people. Oh shit, man.
that's our good buddy Tim. Of course, we always talk about Tim. Have you met Tim yet, Gus?
No, I've only heard that laugh, unfortunately.
Oh man, he's a legend. Not really, but we do love him very much.
Hmm.
So who's coming on tonight, Gus?
Yeah, so I would say that, as some of you know, that we go into the Washita National Forest often, and we try to do our best to do, I guess, what we would consider to be legitimate research, and there are people who have gone before us and have we're standing on the shoulders of giants of many before us who've done great research, and that's the guest we're bringing on tonight, Michael Mays.
All right, let's bring on Michael, man. Mr. Mays, how are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you. Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Hey, we know somebody that you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's Bill Kaufman.
yeah. Wild Bill, yes, sir.
Wow, he's our dude, man. He is very special to us.
He's a good guy.
He is.
Yeah, don't hold that against us.
I'll do my best.
Hey Shane, I'm having some
Yeah.
connection issues. I'm gonna switch my
Sure.
over to my phone.
Okay, ready?
2 seconds.
Okay. That was 2 seconds to me. That was 2 seconds, man.
Was it 2 seconds?
No.
Oh, okay. Alrighty. So, as we get started, Michael, would you just mind kind of giving yourself a brief introduction?
Sure. My name's Michael Mays. I'm not anybody particularly special, I don't think. I was a longtime member of the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, the NAWAC. Served on the board of directors for over a decade and served as the chairman of the board for right at 3 years, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood anyway. Been looking into this topic for over 2 decades now, and have written a book on it and write a blog about it. That about covers it, I think.
Yeah. It's bitten by that Bigfoot bug. So, what was your moment when you were captivated, like towards the wood ape? Like, what was the thing that got you hooked in?
Well, that would actually go way back into the 1970s. I was like a lot of people of a certain age. It was kind of a prime time golden age of Bigfoot stuff. The Patterson Gimlin footage was less than a decade old when I really caught the bug, so to speak. And um, there were these great TV shows. We only had a couple of networks, to pick from, but you had some great shows like In Search of and
Mhm.
things like that that looked into it. I think the hook was set when I saw the $6 million man fight Bigfoot on TV. That
Oh
was
yeah.
that was a big moment for kids of my age at that time. And then certainly, seeing the Legend of Boggy Creek certainly added to that. So it's just something I've always been interested in. I've never completely outgrown it. I did have to put it. I guess I put it aside for a long time as a young adult, starting a family and then trying to, make a living, so to speak. 20 years I've been into it fairly seriously.
Yeah. So, would you go ahead and mind telling us a little bit about? Obviously, as you mentioned before, you were a former member of NAWAC, and you wrote the book Valley of the Apes. And I just have to say, if you haven't read the book yet, if you want to know more about the history and what goes into the research into the Ouachita area by NAWAC, that book does it justice. And that book, I read it in 2 days. It was truly something.
Well, I appreciate that.
What absolutely just blew my mind about this book was how extensive NAWAC went into their research, as in like how many members you guys had, how many teams you guys had. So would you mind just telling us a little bit about how you guys actually got into Area X in the first place?
Oh,
Sure. We got into Area X, like a lot of groups that are out there. We took witness reports. People would submit their encounters to us, and we would investigate, boots on the ground, those that we found the most credible. And we would go out to those sites, talk to those people, search for trace evidence, and so forth. In doing that over the years, we ran across 3 areas that were they were areas of high interest to us, I guess I should say, where, there seemed to be a pattern where these things seem to be seen a lot more often than other areas. And one of them was Area X. We called them Area X, Y, and Z. People always ask, how did we name Area X? Was it an X-Files kind of a thing? And
oh yeah,
because it sounds spooky and cool and all that stuff. And I wish I had a better story, but we just called these two. They could have been areas A, B, and C just as easily as X, Y, Z. Area Y was the Big Thicket in Southeast Texas, an area which I remain very interested in. That's the part of the state I grew up in. We ended up, since that is under the auspices of the National Parks Service, we had to work with them. And from year to year, it would vary how cooperative they were and how friendly they were to us. And eventually they invited us not to be in there anymore doing research like this. So Area Y kind of went away because of that. Area Z was an area on the Trinity River in East Texas, and that turned out to be kind of a bust. After looking into it, I personally, I think it was the landowner was, if not flat out fabricating things. They just had that mindset where there was one behind every tree kind of a thing. You probably come across those kind of folks. There may have been an initial encounter that was legitimate, and afterwards, every noise, every stick that breaks, and that turned out to be a bust. And so Area X was this area, basically it's the entire Ouachita Mountain Range, really, if you get right down to it, where Area X is. And that's the one that panned out to had the most activity. It's also the one where we were fortunate enough to be able to access, in the early days, some private land, where the landowner allowed us to come out there and do our research. We didn't have to fool with permits and things like that, like we did when we dealt with the National Park Service.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You guys, as an organization, still tried to take extensive steps to make sure that you guys didn't cross any legal grounds, and you guys also tried to make sure that you upheld yourselves as a reputable organization. You guys,
we always did. We tried to do things the right way, and that's what kind of. We never got crossways, for example, with the National Park Service and the Big Thicket. We had to go in there. We had to apply for what was called a scientific research permit, and there's I forget what the title was. It's not a supervisor, but there's someone who's down there who's over the Big Thicket, over that. Big Thicket's not one unit; it's several units. I think it's up to about half a dozen now. They're not contiguous; they're broken up. They're kind of all over the place. various amounts of acreage and so forth. So you'd have to apply to go into these units and do your research. And that could, the main thing we did down in the Big Thicket was we had a camera trapping project. We called it Operation Forest Vigil. We had a bunch of game cameras out in an area where there had been a history of sightings and so forth. And the deal we had kind of cut with the NPS was, you're going to get copies of everything we get. You're getting at no cost or effort to you, basically a wildlife census on us,
Yeah.
And, and it was a thing where I think what helped sell them initially was black bears were just starting to kind of come back into East Texas, and nobody was quite sure how far they had come, where exactly where they were. But
Every show.
and that was one thing I think they were interested in, possibly getting a shot of a black bear and just whatever else was running around in there. And of course, we were hopeful, what we were looking for. But if we captured something else that was useful to them, then all the better. And superintendent, that was his title. So the park superintendent initially that was there was I wouldn't say he was a fan of ours or anything, but he recognized that we were trying to do something legitimate and that it could be of some benefit to them, depending on the pictures that we got.
Sure.
That park superintendent, after a couple of years, he moved on to another position. Someone else took his spot who wanted nothing to do with the topic at all. He didn't want to be associated with it any way, shape, or form. And he refused to grant the permit. And so that's when we had to go in and pull our stuff out. So we always tried to do things the right way. And it would have been probably pretty easy to leave the cameras in there because nobody was willing to go back in there as far as we did, I don't think to mess with them, but we didn't. We pulled them, and we just doubled down on Area X and the Ouachitas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell us. So we've always been curious about this. We haven't really had the chance to talk to a lot of park rangers out there. We haven't had the chance to really talk to a lot of individuals that oversee the park about this subject. I know there's probably, it varies on the individual, but is this something that do they see Bigfoots all the time? Or is this something that they were pretty inviting at first because this is something they had all experienced? Like, what was your encounters with the officials in the Ouachita Mountains?
Well, we really didn't have a lot of dealings with anybody in any kind of official capacity in the Ouachitas, be it game wardens or rangers or anything, Forest Service folks at all. Like I said, we were fortunate to have access to a plot of private land that was surrounded by national forest, and since it was on private land, we I think in 10 years, I think I saw one game warden.
Wow.
One time.
Wow.
In 10 years in there. Now, some of the other guys saw some from time to time, now, and it's gotten a little busier and a little more traffic going through there in the later years than there were in the early years. But we did, that was one of the attractions to the area for us. Not only was there a lot of activity historically, and a lot of it not way in the past, the families that had that property, they had a log book in their little cabin up there where they had recorded interesting things that had happened over the years. And since it was on private land, we really didn't have to fool with permitting. We didn't have to fool with, pop inspections and such and things like that, so that was one of the attractions to the area for us.
Sure. So in my understanding of general science, there is a principle of, for us to be able to acknowledge a creature as existing, we have to at least have what we would consider to be a specimen. Mm-hmm. And for us in general science to be able to take something and have it in our hands, and whether it's hair or it's blood or a body. Now, I understand that the premise of the book, the 10 years you guys spent in Area X, was I wouldn't say the sole purpose, but wasn't one of the main objectives of that time it was specimen collection, correct?
Yes, it was. It was something that we felt needed to be happy, and I kind of explain our way of thinking about it. It's an emotional topic. A lot of people get really fired up about that, and it's something I can understand. The way we thought about it was kind of the way science thinks about it. We were thinking in terms of a population, not an individual.
Hmm.
And we felt like if these things are real, and we believe them to be, then there probably aren't just tons of them. Now, I'm not saying they're endangered. I don't think anybody can say that with any amount of certainty or
Yeah.
not. But I don't think hunters presented a particular threat to them, anything like that. What concerned us was the depletion of the habitat. Uh, I forget the number now. I forget how many thousands acres of forest land we lose a day in this country, to development and various projects. And it was no different in the Ouachitas. And
Hmm.
to approach the government with, hey, we want to make a preserve, the Ouachita Mountains. We want to preserve that habitat. We want to, there's this unique species of North American primate that lives there. You might as well be approaching them and asking them to build a unicorn sanctuary out there because, it's not real. And there's a lot of people who say, well, photos would do it. Get DNA, tranquilize it. There are all these suggestions that I tend to take one at a time. The photo evidence, I don't think will ever be sufficient. If the Patterson
Hmm.
Gimlin footage isn't good enough, I don't know whatever will
Hmm.
be. That was taken, in 1967 before digital technology. And anyone trying to pull a hoax like that in the late 1960s would have no way of knowing that digital technology was coming and the kind of scrutiny it would get in the future. And it's held up, contrary to what a lot of people think.
Hmm.
It's held up. If that's not good enough, I'm just not sure any photo will be good enough. And today, with the ease at which AI generated images can be created, photoshopping before that and all that kind of stuff, it's easier now to hoax a photo than it's ever been.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure that will ever be good enough. Tranquilizing one.
Mm.
That's a very, first of all, guys like me, I'm not a vet. I don't have access to that kind of stuff. I
Yeah.
don't have access to
Yeah.
those, kind of drugs and things. Secondly, the gun that's used to fire that projectile, that dart, is not what I would call a high velocity weapon.
Mm.
And most of the time, the encounters we've had over the years have been in heavily, heavily wooded, super, you know, thick areas, just the gnarliest places you can imagine.
Man.
And trying to get one of these trank darts to penetrate that kind of brush and get into an animal that's hiding behind it would be dicey at best
Mm.
if you could get the drugs.
Hmm.
And then thirdly, you've got to, the dosage is important. um you can imagine if you take a known animal, say an African lion, if you go out thinking I'm going to tranquilize a full grown male, a 600-pound lion, and I come across a you know, 100-pound juvenile. I said, well, this will do. And I pop him. Well, that dosage might kill the juvenile.
Hmm.
If you reverse the situation and you're after a small one, and here comes the big male, right? And you pop him, it might just make him angry. It's not. It's a very there are ranges in there, and like I said, I'm not a vet. I don't know
Yeah.
about any of that stuff, and it's just it's something people, I think, like when I was growing up, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom was on every Sunday
Oh
night,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they were out there and they were tranking things, different animals, and putting collars on them and all that. And
Yeah.
it looks easy, on TV, but that's in reality, it's not nearly as practical a solution as I think a lot of people feel it is. And so the DNA, the way DNA works is there's basically a bank of known DNA samples, and any DNA that's collected gets compared to these this gene bank.
Mhm.
And if there's not a match, the best that you can hope for is that some scientist says, well, this is unknown. Well, that doesn't prove that it's Bigfoot, right? It
Mhm.
just, oh, I don't know. More often than not, when that's the case, you get, well, this must be contaminated,
Mm.
and because otherwise it would be in the gene bank. Now, I've got high hopes for as science comes along and technology changes, some of this environmental DNA we've heard so much about, where you can take water samples or soil samples and things
Mhm.
like that. Hopefully, we could take uh, some samples, like say out of a trackway, if that's ever found, and you could pull some soil out of a trackway and send that in, and then you get an unknown sample. Well, now it's in a certain context, right? And now it's still not proof, but it gets more intriguing. But to get steps to protect a species that is as crazy to most people as a 7 foot tall ape in North
Mhm.
America, you're going to have some hard proof. And we just felt for a long time that that's what it was going to take. And that's the way science historically has worked. There was a new monkey a couple years ago. It was discovered down in South America, and everybody was all excited. Oh, and a new primate, a new
Mhm.
monkey thing. See, there's still things out there we don't know. What no one realized is, well, how did they get this specimen? Well, they shot him out of a tree is what they did, and it's, that's not
The hard
pretty,
truth.
that's
Mhm.
not broadcast, but that's what happened. And the way we thought was, if we could get one to prove that the species was real, then we could save all of them. We could get the species protected, we could get it listed, we could get habitat protected, and so that's kind of the way we were thinking at the time. Now, personally, I've kind of come to the conclusion that a citizen scientist like myself, or a lot of these people who go out on their own, we probably have no business actually trying to do this. I think you're opening yourself up to a very big can of worms of all kinds of
Yeah.
problems.
Oh yeah.
So, I think what we should do, like I said, my point of view, I still think it's necessary. I do. I just think that what we need to do is provide enough anecdotal evidence, stuff that's in context, build that case, build that stack of evidence tall enough until we get someone's attention. So a Nat Geo or a Smithsonian or someone like that goes out and who's equipped to do it, can go out and take care of that part of it. But yeah, I still think it's necessary. It's kind of unpopular with a lot of people, that opinion.
Mhm.
But a lot of you're going to kill something to prove it's alive. That's not the way I think of it. I think of it as you have to prove it's real to preserve and conserve the species.
Yeah.
And, and a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their arms around that, which, I get. It's an emotional subject, but we were trying to do that. We were.
Yeah, and one of the things I always find interesting about the Sasquatch conversation is that you have this dichotomy of, if you have footage that is better than the Patterson Gimlin film, it's too good to be true. If you have
Mm.
footage of equal or worse quality, then it's too blurry and is considered insufficient evidence. And Shane is a graphic designer. I work in media and videography for my company. So him and I, for a project we're doing, we made a poster together. I typed in 2 sentences and created a beautiful poster with a Bigfoot on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in a world nowadays where the
Mm-hmm.
days of the photographs and the video evidence is soon going to be completely illegitimate on all levels by all parties, because anything can be faked nowadays. Now, if you have
Well,
somebody
what
work with
and what?
eye for that,
Mhm.
then you can kind of catch that stuff. But we posted a photo of a Black Panther on our group a few days ago, and then in the comments section there was a debate on, is this a real or a AI created photo, because that's how just realistic it's becoming. And I'm sorry for the interruption, Shane, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm just gonna say, like, as far as like finding fake pictures and stuff and whatnot, you can forensically metadata challenge
Yes.
a digital, image. I mean, yes, you can go in and change some of the metadata, but there's always going to be something there that you can't change.
Yeah.
And it'll have backends and codes to
And
how it's
you're
built.
right, of course, but what happens? You have to have someone who has that
Mhm.
skill set, who's willing to even look at it. I'll give you. You
Mhm.
mentioned the Black Panther thing. I've looked into that particular phenomenon a lot as well. Did a book on that also.
Oh, awesome.
And I talked to. Well, what happened was I had a witness who contacted me who said he had hit one of these big black cats in Central Texas. He had hit it with his vehicle one night, and the thing had rolled over a few times. It didn't go up under the car. It kind of rolled and popped up and kind of limped off into the woods. And he said when he got home, he had these black hairs on his bumper, on his grill.
Oh, yeah.
And so he asked if I would like those, and I was like, of course, absolutely. And so he did send them to me, and I sent oh boy, I bet I emailed every university's in Texas, their biology department, looking for someone who, I wasn't looking for a free DNA analysis or anything, but I wanted someone who was familiar with hair morphology, if they could look at it under a microscope, say, what does this look like to you? I mean, because a lot of times, it's a hog, 100%. And then that's it. You don't worry about it anymore.
Mhm.
Couldn't find anybody willing to. I got 3 replies out of all these emails I sent, and I had photos under a microscope that a friend of mine had done for me. And this guy is kind of a lab rat. This is kind of his hobby, and we had gotten a hold of a key of all these. What all these animals' hairs look like under microscope. He said it doesn't look like anything in the key. It says, but it's closest to a leopard. That's the closest thing I can find. He says, you
Wow.
really should have somebody that knows what more than I do. Look at these. I said, okay, great. So I pursued it. Only a couple of people, like I said, 3 people responded. One of them, as a matter of fact, who sent the key, that we could look at, and compare it to. One guy was in. Well, I probably shouldn't name where he's from. One professor, all he did to respond was to lecture me that there's no such thing, as a Black Panther. And I said, well, I know that. I said, but here people are seeing something, and I'm thinking maybe it's a melanistic jaguar, maybe it's, a known species, but, people are seeing something. And he says, well, there's no such thing. And I said, well, how can you be so sure? And he said, well, because there's no evidence. I said, well, I think I might have evidence. He says, well, your evidence cannot be valid. And I said, why do you say that? How do you know that? He said, because there's no such thing. So it's this circuitous, this circle that we went through, and, it's not real. Therefore, your evidence cannot be valid. And if you have evidence, it's not valid because it's not real. And this is where we just, went on and on and on. And so that's kind of where we are now. There's a lot of people who won't touch these subjects,
Yeah.
just
Right.
because of the reputation they have.
Right. So when you guys kind of still steer back towards Area X a little bit.
Mhm.
So when you guys were at X, the second half of the book, by the way, it just, from the moment it begins till the moment it ends, it is account after account after account. and I told my wife about this book, and I said, this is either the greatest comprehensive book on the Washita's about Bigfoot that I know of, or this is the greatest collective hoax that I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And and I know the character of Bill Kaufman, and I don't know the other men personally, but in the Bigfoot world, it's not often what you have to gain; it's what you have to lose in terms of your reputation, in terms of being a guy.
Well, and let me speak to that on the book itself for a moment.
Oh yeah.
You take the book and you read through the book, and it seems like, okay, there's this great story after story, encounter after encounter, page after page. That's because it's not much fun for me to devote 300 pages to the days when nothing happened. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, it does.
what you've got is, I've taken basically a decade worth of field notes that we did.
Right.
And I have zeroed in on the most interesting things that happened. You got to remember, over a 10-year period. Now you condense that into a 300-page book.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, and actually, I believe in the last chapter, we totaled up the man hours again, because we addressed that very thing, because people are going to get the impression that we saw these things 3 times a day, every day. And that's just not the case at all. And, we worked it out where, if I'm remembering correctly, it worked out to one visual every, I don't know, like 12 or 13 days or something like that. And
I believe you had 770
like
days total of research, and you averaged it out to about 15.2 days.
Okay. So so once about every 2 weeks, somebody caught most of the time, a 5-second glimpse of something zipping by, Now the rocks and things like that, these are that rain down on us and hit the cabins and the vehicles and the weird noises and all that. Of course, we didn't see anything when those happened, 99% of the time. So, but again, nobody's going to buy that book or be interested in a book where, well, nothing happened today, and guess what? Nothing happened yesterday, nothing happened. It's going to happen the day after either, and so it can be if you don't keep that in mind, you can get that impression that it's just continuous all the time, and that's not true.
Right.
Now, was it an extremely active area as far as this kind of thing goes? Absolutely, and more so in the early days than in the last few years. It slowed down. The last 2 or 3 years we were there, for sure. The first 2 or 3 years were pretty crazy, and then we had the last couple of years where things slowed down considerably, and those years in the interval were somewhere in between. It was kind of your bell-shaped curve, right? So so I do want to address that, because you can easily get that impression, and it's really a lot of people, a lot of hours, and a lot of years that people were there. And so you're just getting I guess the NAWAC's greatest hits, so to speak. In the book, if you were kind of think of it that way.
Yeah, nobody wants to read about Bill Kaufman's scenic walk around Cucumber Creek.
All right, I mean,
I don't know. I might want to hear that, man.
I mean, it's
it probably involves shooting something, I imagine.
And in the book too, the original manuscript was over 500 pages. And the editor came to me and said, "Hey, Mike, we got to cut this down." And I said, well, I don't want to. This is all great stuff. He says, "Well, Mike, you're right." He says, "But how many times are we going to say the rock hit the cabin?" I said, "But it did." I said, "Well," he goes, "Yeah, but that's going to get a little tedious after us." So even what you have there is cut back to a large degree. So yeah, we didn't see one every day. We didn't see one behind every tree. Something. Weeks would go by, nothing. I remember I was so mad one year. they'd had all this crazy stuff happen the week before we relieved that team, and I came in with my team, and it rained all week long. It was like biblical Noah and the Ark type rain stuff,
Dang.
and nothing, for a solid week. And it cleared up the day we left. And within, I think, first 48 hours, all kinds of crazy stuff started happening to the team after us, I mean, so there was a whole lot of nothing. I've always said that this Bigfooting thing it's 99% boredom and 1% terror. That's kind of the way it works. You're scared out of your underwear, for 1% of the time, but most of the time, it's not a lot's going on. So,
Yeah.
So yeah, it you can get that impression by reading the book, but it is, what we've done is we've told the best stories, the highlights of those 10 years is kind of what I was shooting for.
Yeah. And I love in the book how the detail of who you talk about your team, from what you say, and I'm sure you would even co-sign it today, the team you had were just great professionals, and they were great, men and women who dedicated time, on personal funds to make the trip down there. And when the study was all said and done, and I won't tell the whole story of the book because you got to read it yourself to truly capture the magic that's there. You kind of tally up towards the end everything that was acquired. And you guys showed from pictures of giant rocks thrown at cabins. You guys showed areas that had I forget the name of the rocks they used to crack nuts open to eat them. I don't know what they're called.
Called them nut crushing stations. Nut
crushing stations. Yeah. And and you wrote in the book, when you accumulated all of the data, I believe the figure that you wrote were 51 confirmed hard sightings of a Bigfoot at X, or at least in that general vicinity. And what amazes me about the conversation about Bigfoot, and this isn't our story, it's about the book, but I'm new to the Bigfoot scene as of about, give or take, 5 months. And I went on an expedition with Shane, he's over here, Shane, and a couple other guys, and these guys were great. Shout out to Dustin Smith for the invitation. But what ended up happening was, at the very end of the trip, we found a footprint, and then it wasn't super eventful up to a certain point. And that last night, things just took off. And we were recording one of the guys in our group, Brian, great guy, appreciate his leadership. And we were recording him telling his story of seeing a Sasquatch in the Washitas at an area we call Hardwood. Well, he ends up, sorry, my dog's coming in, get out. It's not his show. But what happens is we record him telling his story, and clear as day, Shane was there. We hear a Bigfoot roar out loud. And I take that recording home. I show all my friends. I'm excited, and the excitement hasn't stopped since that moment. I haven't stopped Bigfooting anything. And then I get to compare recordings. And by the way, NAWAC on their website has plenty of Fox Beach recordings, stones hitting the cabins, like an embarrassment of riches of things.
Yeah, that's probably the greatest amount of evidence we collected was audio. We always had audio running. We attempted video, especially the last few years, with not a lot of success. But nighttime, we always had recorders going all night long, and we got some pretty interesting stuff. So that's a great listen. If you go, it's woodape.org is the NAWAC site, and you can go. It's just a depository with a bunch of the sound recordings there. Screams and whoops and whistles and rock strikes and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty compelling stuff. And we totaled it all up, and one criticism, and I think it's valid now looking back in hindsight of us, was we didn't take enough pictures of everything that we saw and heard. But like we discussed earlier, we were focused on collection, and so a stray track here or there, we didn't go to do all the forensic stuff that a lot of people do. We didn't cast every track. We didn't measure and what's the stride, what's the straddle, what's the, we didn't do as much. Not that we found a lot of tracks. That's kind of a misnomer too, that you find tracks everywhere. The forest floor is just littered with debris, and the Washita's are probably the rockiest place I've ever been. It's people who haven't been there don't know. It's a very old mountain range. It's breaking down and it's deteriorating. And when mountains break down, they make rocks. And it's like I said, just walking around up there is difficult because it's so rocky. And so there's not a lot of great places that would be receptive to a track. So when you find them, it's pretty rare, but we should have and could have done better about documenting those things than we did. But like I said, we were focused on one thing. And so looking back, I wish we had taken more time and done that. And we got better about it the last few years than we did there in the early days and in the middle years there. But so I would say it's a valid criticism of us during that time. We should have done a better job of that.
Right. So, Shane, we're about to say something. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, man. Oh, actually, I was gonna. No, go ahead. You go ahead, dude. You go ahead.
Okay. So I actually had I actually talked to a few friends, and we're Bigfoot believers, of course. And I had a few friends that I talked to, and I always bounced it off a skeptic. That is and from my understanding from NAWAC's perspective is that's the same approach you guys take, is you guys approach everything with every tree, every twig is not Bigfoot. I appreciate the approach to I don't want to say too much, but you got acknowledged in the last part of the book that you guys weren't huge into the whole like telepathy and Bigfoot's riding clouds with bolts of lightning in their hand. Like there was a level of realism that came to
well, and I'll talk about that for a minute. It's, you hear all these stories, and then you have your personal firsthand experiences and those of your friends that you trust, literally with your life, when you're out there. And in these 20 years I've been doing this, never have I seen or heard anything that would fall into those more, I don't know, the metaphysical stuff, the mind speak, the telepathy, the portals and all that stuff that you hear about. Now, everything we saw that we observed was explainable by a physical being, and the behaviors were those that you see in the known great apes of the world. You had bluff charges like gorillas do. You had vegetation shaking. You had the throwing of rocks and sticks and the screams and the howls and the whoops and the stuff like that the known great apes do. We never came across anything that we could associate with something along those lines. Now, people, it's funny, and some in the Bigfoot community call me closed-minded because, I say I'm not, I just don't think there's anything to that stuff. Meanwhile, the regular world, I believe in Bigfoot. I'm like a nut, right? So I'm somewhere in between. I just go, by what I've observed, what I've seen, what our group did and observed and saw. We didn't see any of that. Now, I'm open to changing my mind. I'll give you an example of it. My dog's trying to get in now. The first time I heard the Sierra sounds played years and years ago, I laughed. I thought, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Who could possibly believe that this is real?
Same.
I mean, I totally crapped all over it. I really did. And then I heard it myself. I heard that the typical, I think what most people call it is samurai chatter. We called it faux speech. I heard it with my own ears. And so, I had to eat some crow. I owe Ron Moorhead an apology if I ever meet him, because I totally, that's the biggest bunch of nonsense I've ever heard. I, when confronted by
Yeah.
evidence, had to change my mind.
Mhm.
And that's what you hope a skeptic will do. When they're confronted with evidence that disproves what they thought, an open-minded skeptic will change their mind. So often we're both sides are just so entrenched. A skeptic, what that really means is it's all baloney, and I just like getting online and laughing at you guys and criticizing all you believers, right? And I'll never change my mind.
Mhm.
Someone who says they're open-minded, often they believe anything and everything. And what we've got to be is somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
uh, be skeptical, with the trust but verify thing that everyone's heard. That's the way we try to be. And so if I was ever to be confronted with something along the lines of what a lot of these people have talked about, um, I'd have to reconsider, my opinions on it. But I just, like I said, for 20 years, I would just never come across anything that would fall into that category.
Yeah, I think every Bigfoot story that you hear, and I think I told you over Messenger, we're shooting a documentary right now. So
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to meeting people and shooting and filming their stories and hearing what they genuinely have experienced, it does deserve a level of respect for sure.
Sure, sure.
But at the same time, you have to approach everything as looking at a data set. And in
Mm-hmm.
the situation of the Washita Bigfoot, the data set hasn't showed that as of right now. But that's not to say
Well,
eventually
and
it couldn't.
if I could jump in here too, because I want to make this clear too. I want to be clear that I'm not saying people who've had these unusual experiences are lying. Okay. This is related by an experience. A lady had reported a sighting in Deep East Texas in Newton County, and I talked to her about it, and she told me what happened. I was driving down the road, and this big black thing comes out of the woods on all fours into the middle of the road. I bring my car to a stop. I'm looking at it. It stands up, sniffs the air, looks at me, drops down to all fours, and goes into the woods again. And as I got her to better describe it, she described a tan nose, kind of a snout. Well, she saw a bear. She saw a black bear. I'm 99% sure she saw a black bear. And so she was, in my opinion, mistaken, but she was not lying. She was very sincere with what she experienced.
Mhm.
And it's funny, bears have been gone in East Texas so long that people are more familiar with the Sasquatch than they are a black bear, right?
Yeah.
But so I bring that story up just to say, I believe what she saw could be explained with something not mundane, but something that, okay, that's a known animal. That's something that we're familiar with.
Mhm.
And it was a misidentification. She wasn't lying, and she wasn't trying to make something up for sensationalism or anything like that. And so I think it's a chance that some of these people who've had these more strange experiences that I'm not there. I'm not going to tell them what they've seen or what they've heard, what's
Mhm.
happened to them.
That's my
But,
approach. Mhm.
uh, I don't think anybody's necessarily lying. I just wonder in my mind if there's something else going on that maybe could explain some of that. I wish I could offer some of those possible explanations. I can't, but
Yeah.
I don't want to come across like I think people are not telling the truth. It's just I haven't, like I said, we've been doing this a long time, and we just have had nothing along those lines, and we've had a lot of activity. So, but like I said, if anything comes up, I'm open to changing my mind if something ever happened.
Hey, Michael, what about any other types of cryptids or whatnot? Have you people? I know people on here were asking something about. Has he seen a dog man? Have you seen anything else that's just you were like,
Well, what have I seen? I saw what the media has labeled a chupacabra once.
oh, no kidding.
Yeah, that was one of these. Now in East Texas, where I grew up, we saw these mangy canines all the time. They were coyotes
Mhm.
or foxes. We were actually coming back from a camera maintenance trip in the big thicket, and we cut through the Sam Houston National Forest, and
Mhm.
there was one stand that came kind of staggering out into the road, and it was clearly to me anyway, it was clearly a coyote, but it was completely hairless. Had this bluish gray elephant
Mangy
looking
look
kind
to
of
him.
skin,
Yeah.
little stray bristle here or there. And it was clearly a sick animal. It was not well.
Yeah.
It just didn't move well. But if I'd taken pictures of that and sent it to the paper,
Oh yeah.
would have been chupacabra sighting everywhere, right?
Yeah.
As far as with my own eyes, that's probably about it, other than the wood ape stuff. Now, people in the group,
Mhm.
we've had sightings of what we think very well might have been red wolves in the
Oh,
Ouachitas,
cool.
which are not
You hear
supposed to
about
be
that?
there. Yeah,
Mhm.
they're not supposed to be there. And um, we did have one member see a black bobcat up there, which
Oh wow.
is pretty rare stuff. But as far as other kind of cryptids, that's that's it. That's all I've seen. Now I'm interested in all all that other stuff.
Yeah.
That's why I started writing the blog all those years ago, because it's not just about Bigfoot stuff. It's about whatever interests me, and I'm interested in a lot of things. So
Very cool. Sorry, Gus. I just cut in since you left. Okay. Hey, I wanted to go back up here real quick. So let's see. Pat Turner was asking. So Pat always likes to rock the boat. Why bother with permits? It's public land. Just
Nah, it's
go ahead and
I
hang
know,
on to
I
it.
know
my
Pat.
connection's awful. I'm sorry
Yeah,
about that.
Yeah, everybody knows Pat,
but
I
right?
know Pat.
question I have
He called the
for
cover
you,
of my
Mark.
book "Disingenuous" online the other day. So
Oh, way to
which
go,
is
Pat.
fine. No, Pat, the reason we had to
Oh
get
man,
permits is not. You're
no.
right. We would not have needed permits to just go out there,
Uh-oh.
wander around a little bit, look for evidence and stuff. Um, but we were leaving cameras out there, and so that was National Forest Service. It's the big thicket is governed a little differently than, say, a national forest like the Sam Houston or the Davy Crockett National Forest is. And so to do that, we were required to get a scientific research permit. And we were in one of the units. The unit we were in was the Lance Rozier unit. It's about 25,000 acres, give or take. It's just wilderness. And to go back there are no trails. There are no the only thing that cuts through there are these senderos, these pipeline right of ways, for, I guess, they're oil pipelines that go through there.
Mhm.
But to even go out there and spend the night, you had to get what they called a backcountry permit. You couldn't just go pitch a tent out there, not legally anyway. They could run you off if they found you. So that's unique to the thicket. But even in the national forest, there are certain regulations that a lot of people don't know about. But out there, yes, it's public land, but there's still rules, and that we had to play by their rules to do that. So because we were leaving cameras out there, that's why we had to get those permits.
Good answer, man. That Pat likes to push. He likes to push buttons. He's a button pusher.
That's okay. We need those guys.
Oh, I know. I hear you, man. So Misty's asking, do you know anything about Daniel Boone National Forest?
Personally, I've never been. So I would not be the guy to talk to. The guy you might want to talk to is a good friend of mine named Matt Pruitt, who's come out with a great book of his own recently called The Phenomenal Sasquatch. Matt was in the NAWAC with me and was on the board of directors with me, and he may be the smartest guy in the field. And so he's from back that way. He would no doubt be more familiar with it than I.
Awesome. What you got, Gus? Gus is freezing. Quit freezing, Gus. Gus is like, Okay. Oh my God. Hey man, anytime you write a book, you need a badass book cover. Give me a holler. I got you, man.
Oh, okay. I'll
Yeah.
keep that in mind. I'll keep that in mind
Yes,
because
sir.
it's yeah, it's a process, man. It really is. If you haven't been through that, uh,
No,
I've
I haven't.
done traditional publishing and I've done a little of the self-publishing thing, but it's the
Oh,
traditional thing, man. It's a grind.
Am I still freezing?
Yeah,
Okay, we're good.
A little bit.
a little bit.
So the question is what a topic
Oh man,
to talk
poor Gus.
about? What
He choked,
is
man.
Bigfoot?
Okay, I'm not sure I caught all that.
What do you
Could
want to
you-
know, Gus? Like, what do you think Michael thinks Bigfoot is? Oh boy. Let me take a screenshot so I can show him later. It's just too funny. Gus. Okay, what about this here, Michael? Con Squatch is asking, what's your weirdest experience in the woods while looking?
Well,
Good question.
the strangest thing I ever experienced was in the Washita's, and it was not a visual of any kind. It was an
Can y'all not see
auditory
me?
encounter. Oh,
Can you guys hear me?
Hey,
yeah.
Gus, get back on your phone, dude. So go ahead, Michael.
So we were on one of the teams. We were out there for a week. We'd been out there 2 or 3 days, and so it was night. Another member and I were. What we would do typically, one thing we had learned is that I don't know if it's because these animals find us entertaining or they're curious or they're keeping an eye on us or what. You know, we always joke that they don't have Netflix or YouTube or anything to go look at, so we're it for them, you know. So we always felt like they would come in at night to, you know, kind of look if they were around. They weren't always around, obviously, but sometimes they were, and if they were, they would tend to come in and take a look around, check on us, and see what we were up to. And we learned that if we kept a cold camp, if we didn't have a fire, that forced them, if they wanted to see us, they had to come in a little closer. And of course, we were working with thermal units and stuff, hoping that that would get them close enough where we could see them, you know.
Yeah.
Well, this particular night, another member and I were sitting near the fire ring, but it was cold. There was, you know, nothing in it. We had a little hunting cabin down there, nothing fancy, but just right there. And then next to it, there was a, we called it the hooch, but what it was is it's just a metal carport like you'd see in somebody's driveway. So it was metal on top, and then on one side, it came down to the ground. The metal came to the ground. So 3/4 of the lower half was of the lower part was open. So you had the roof and then one metal wall. And that's the wall we would put shelving and stuff up against. It was just something to keep our equipment dry and somewhere we could sit in, you know, when it rained, which it does a lot up there. So that metal wall that comes down to the ground faced the mountain that our cabin was up against. And so we're sitting there, and it had been a quiet night. Not much had been going on. And we hear this sound that I've never heard before. It was something. It was like something had a club or a huge stick or a branch or something substantial, and it was just beating the ground, boom, 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 over and over and over again, with, I mean, force, you know, legitimate force. And it was swinging whatever it was swinging so hard that you could hear it cut through the air, just that second before it hit the ground. If you ever watched a golf tournament on TV, you hear that right before the contact. You could hear that right before it struck the ground, and just so boom, 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 over and over and over, and it stopped. And it sounded close. And so we just kind of looked at each other, and we've got the thermals. We're scanning. We can't see anything. And we say, okay, just sit tight, you know, and maybe it'll come a little closer if it's trying to scare us off, right? So not very much time goes by, just a few minutes before it starts again, and it sounds closer, and it sounds more powerful. Maybe it's just because it was closer. It's louder, it's faster. The beating of the ground, the boom, 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 over and over again, and it's faster. You know, now I have no way of knowing whatever this thing was, what it was really thinking, but you know, it's giving you the impression this thing is pissed. This thing's angry, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't want us here. And it sounded like it was right under the hooch, right under that carport structure, you know, that metal structure. And the guy I was with, his name was Tony. I said, Tony, it is right there. It has to. I thought this thermal's not working. It has to be right there. So we light it up, and there's nothing there. And we walk around, and we look behind that wall. There's nothing there, and we can't see thermals up the mountain. Nothing there. So we're like, okay, let's do this. And we had learned a while back, one thing that's in the book we talk about is these thermal units can see through black plastic of the kind that like garbage bags are made out of. So if you get 2-ply, you want 1-ply, but you can hang these things up, build a little tent structure, whatever. You can sit inside of it and look out with the thermal, and you can see, you know, with the thermal. And theoretically, whatever's out there can't see you behind the plastic. And so we had built a screen on the little porch with the black plastic around, you know, the porch blocking the view into the cabin. So we made a big show. Let's pretend to go inside, and then we'll sit here on the porch, and we'll see if it'll come back. So we made a big show out of going up the steps and opening and shutting the door a few times, and you know, squeaking the mattress like we were going to go to bed, and then we quietly in our sock feet, you know, come back out on the porch and quietly as we could sit down with the thermals. And again, within just a few minutes, I was on the left side of the porch, kind of close to the edge, and it sounded close enough like it could have just reached in and snatched me right off the porch. It's how close. And again, it's the same sound, but faster, more ferocious. Wha-bam, 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 just over and over again. And we bust down out of, you know, down the steps and out looking, and there's just nothing there. Now, I've never experienced anything like that. I don't know. Whatever it was strong. Whatever it was powerful, and whatever it was could hang on to something and beat the ground with it. You know, a bear can't do that. So you can do the math. It's you know, there's nothing out there that's supposed to be able to do something like that. And so it was really bizarre in the sense that we felt like we should be able to see it. And maybe this falls into that category we were talking about earlier. I don't know. I've never really thought of it that way. But our conclusion was, you know, the mountain has a couple little plateaus in it as it goes up, and maybe something, and it's so thick, the brush is so thick, maybe something was not quite as close as we thought it was, but still very close. But and the last thing, I forgot to add this. So it's beating the ground, bam, bam, bam. And then the final sound we heard, it either took whatever it was swinging and just cracked the side of that carport, or threw something and hit the side of the carport. And it made a sound. Oh my gosh, it's the loudest thing I've ever heard. And that structure, that hooch, the carport structure, it vibrated and hummed for about 7 minutes afterwards. It just rung it like a bell. And we were just stupefied. We were, you know, just gobsmacked by the whole thing. You know, we didn't, you know, that was really bizarre and far more intimidating than anything I've seen. Because I don't know, there's something about knowing there's something big and strong and powerful out there, and it's close, and it knows we're here, and we don't know where it is. And it's that's probably the most unnerved I've ever been.
I bet.
Yeah. So before we're about at that cutoff time, Michael. So before we cut off, would you like to give a? I know you just released a new book, so would you like to give a plug for that?
Well, I have, but this one actually has nothing to do with any kind of cryptozoology
That's okay, man.
topics at all. I'm
That's
a
all right.
longtime teacher and coach here in Texas, and it's kind of over the years I've collected some pretty funny and humorous stories.
Yeah.
Things these kids say and do, and one of my favorite chapters is about the excuse notes I got when I was coaching the kids trying to get out of PE. It's pretty funny. So it's called Life in the Middle, and it's about what a lot of these, mostly it's during my time that when I was in middle school. That's when a lot of the funniest stuff happens. That's where the title comes from. It's called Life in the Middle, and there's that. If you're more of the
Oh, man.
cryptozoological stuff, the Valley of the Apes is the story of the NAWAC and in my time there while we were in Area X. And before that, a few years, I mentioned that I had written a book on the Black Panther phenomenon, and that's called Shadow Cats, the Black Panthers of North America. And so
Life in the Middle.
that's the school book. Yeah, that's the latest one. And like
That
I said,
actually
that's
sounds
not,
like a pretty fun read, actually.
it is.
You know?
It's fun. It's light. It's only about 117 pages, I think, and it's kind of funny. And there's a few kind of sad ones in there too. But it was fun. So if you know a teacher, have a teacher in your life, that might be a good gift. For
Yeah,
them.
my wife's a librarian, 5th and 6th grade. So
then she'd appreciate it then. She's seen some of this stuff.
She comes home and tells me stuff all the time. Like, oh my God.
Yeah,
it's pretty fun. All right, man. Valley of the Apes. I actually need to read this book. I mean, I've spent enough time out there, around there. Now we're in Tallahena too, and it's just. I mean, I live in Texas too, Mike. I live in Burleson, just south of Fort Worth.
Okay.
So I'm always, but I've camped more in Oklahoma than I have in Texas my whole life.
Anyway,
Period. So
I guess we'll just close it down.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say, Michael? Anything you got? Anything?
No, guys, I appreciate you having me on.
Oh man, you were a great guest.
It's a pleasure, and anytime.
Awesome. That's good to know too. Maybe we'll run into you out there someday. Who knows?
You just might.
Just might. Gus, you got any last freezing you need to do? He's froze. All right, man. Well, I appreciate it, Michael. I really appreciate you coming on, man, and keep in touch, man. This is
I'm easy to find. Just holler at me.
Yeah, for sure. It was nice to meet you, sir.
I appreciate it again. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
All right. See you, man. Well, Gus, what happened there, buddy? Are you okay, man? Are you froze? Oh wait, you just moved. Are you?
Yeah.
Are you in real time? Gus. Oh my goodness. I think Gus is okay. Gus is gone. All right, folks. Well, I'll talk to y'all later. All right.